Neil, would this kind of high-risk pay for high-risk occupations fall under what the unions describe as danger pay? And we've already seen them come out to say that especially those on the front line need to be given some form of danger pay. But there's been incredible pushback from the state on it.
Yeah, of course there is pushback, because the question is, in these sorts of situations, whose voices are loudest? And we saw in the push to reopen the economy rapidly, the voices that were loudest were those of business who wanted to return to profitability, wanted their businesses to run, all of which is understandable. We live in a capitalist economy. That is the rationale that motivates them. But at the same time, there needs to be consideration about the impact that that has on ordinary workers. And what the international experience has shown is that through creative use of various mechanisms, in Germany, for example, they've got short time, which is financed by the state, a special scheme. There are other processes where they're aiming to shorten the working week, premium pay for frontline workers. This can be a combination of a reconfiguration of the wage structure as well as state support. What we've seen is that the initial 500 billion rand package has in certain respects not materialized. So many businesses, households and individuals are not getting the support they need. So that package needs to be revised, and perhaps a second wave of the package needs to be introduced, because clearly at the moment, the most vulnerable are taking the biggest burden. And we saw with the CRAM survey, with the loss of 3 million jobs plus another 1.5 million incomes, which overwhelmingly hit poor working class women, that it's very clear who is taking the greatest burden of this pandemic. And measures are needed to mitigate that and to make the organization of work and society more equitable. And that's what we're calling for.
It's such an important point that you're raising about who has really been the hardest hit, and based on the research that we have so far. But what it also shows is that the biggest impact is in the informal sector, and that is a sector that is sometimes much less organized than those that are in corporate or that have the representation of unions. How then can government begin to ensure that even the support that it's offering enters that space too? Because even when we talk about the response for SMMEs, that certainly hasn't reached the hawkers, the women who are hawkers and who sell on the street. They haven't had assistance.
No, that's true, Kathy, but it's also true that it hasn't reached people across the board, households in working class community, regardless of the sectors that they work in. Actually, for the informal economy, there have been very coherent and well-argued proposals that have been put forward to government as to how to support informal traders, as to how to ensure that income support through the form of the COVID grant, et cetera, goes to informal workers. And that was what the COVID special grant was partly aimed at. The problem with those grants, as we've seen, is that because they are there's so many exceptions, so many conditions, so many problems with administrative inefficiencies, that it's not reaching the people that it needs to reach. And that's one of the biggest arguments now for the rolling out of the universal basic income grant. And the IEJ has been arguing that we now need a universal grant running up to the phasing out of the COVID grant in October this year. It's clear that with massive rise in the levels of poverty and hunger in our communities, that the need for this income support is now absolutely critical.